What would you do if the family that spent your whole life calling you a disappointment showed up begging you to save them, using money they didn't even know you had? I'm Marcus, 33. I run a fabrication shop out of a converted barn, on land my grandfather left me, and according to my parents, that makes me the family embarrassment. My older sister Renata married a man named Trent who worked in wealth management, which in our house meant he'd basically been knighted. I'd been welding railings and gates since I was 19. In my father's eyes, that was one step above being unemployed. 5 years ago, I married Sophia under the walnut trees on that same land. No banquet hall, no string quartet, just folding. Chairs, string lights, a smoker running all afternoon, and about 60 people who actually liked us. My crew came straight from work, boots and all. Sophia's friends showed up in sundresses carrying pies they'd baked themselves. It was the best day of my life, and my family treated it like they were doing volunteer work at a shelter. My mother wore sunglasses the entire ceremony, like she couldn't bear to be seen at it. My father checked his phone so often I thought he was expecting a call about the end of the world. Renata and Trent arrived 20 minutes late in an outfit combo that looked staged for a magazine shoot. Completely wrong for a backyard wedding. The toasts were where it got ugly. Trent stood up, glass in hand, and decided this was his moment to perform. When Renata told me her brother welded things for a living, I pictured overalls and a blowtorch romance, he said, and his finance friends laughed like he'd said something clever. Then he kept going, something about how his wife was earthy, how the two of us made a real hardware store love story. My sister added her own line about being so brave for choosing a simple life, delivered in the exact tone you'd use to compliment someone's garage sale finds. My father's toast wasn't even cruel enough to be memorable, just disappointment, dressed up in a suit that cost more than my truck. That night, cleaning up alone with Sophia under the trees, she told me the truth I needed to hear. They keep score because they don't know how to measure anything else. What we built today, none of them can see it. Doesn't make it less real. She had no idea how right she'd turn out to be. See, what nobody in my family knew was that for 6 years, starting before I even met Sophia, I'd been running an experiment in the back corner of my shop. I was sick of watching outdoor steelwork rust apart within a few winters, so I started digging into materials science on my own time. Journals, forums, emails to professors who probably thought I was a crank. Sophia, who'd studied environmental chemistry before working at a wildlife trust, became my unofficial lab partner. She'd come home from her job covered in nothing and find me covered in metal dust and burnt reagent, muttering about molecular bonding. 4 years of failure. Then finally, a formula that worked. A treatment that made steel and aluminum dramatically stronger. Essentially rust-proof, lighter, and clean enough to pass every environmental screen I threw at it. I left samples outside through 2 brutal winters. I salt sprayed them. I stress tested them to failure. Nothing beat it. 2.5 years ago, I filed 4 patents, formed an LLC, and quietly started shopping the technology to manufacturers. I named it Ferrocor Materials. I wasn't hiding from my family out of shame. I just didn't want their commentary while I built something. Year 1, silence. Year 2, a regional coatings company bit. By year 3, 6 months before everything blew up, I had 2 active licensing deals and a valuation north of $4 million, all while my parents still introduced me at parties as the one who does the gates. Meanwhile, Renata and Trent were living loud. He'd quit his firm to launch his own investment shop, all aggressive real estate plays and getting in early. My father talked about him like he'd discovered fire. Renata quit event planning to become a full-time lifestyle influencer, documenting their walk-in closet, their wine fridge, their home gym like it was public infrastructure. We got invited to the housewarming. I built them a coffee table as a gift. Hand-welded frame, tempered glass, powder-coated black, the kind of piece I'd normally charge 4 figures for. Renata set it in a corner and never looked at it again. That whole night was a parade of humiliation dressed as hospitality. Renata introduced Sophia to her influencer friends as so noble, living on basically nothing to save the trees, while the women scanned Sophia's plain dress and moved on to talk about handbags. Trent cornered me near the bar. "Good for you, man. Honest work. World needs guys who do the boring stuff," he said, patting my shoulder like I was a golden retriever. Later, in the living room, Trent was mid-brag about some deal he'd closed, going on about vision and knowing which horses to bet on. Renata gazed up at him. I don't even ask questions anymore. I just let him handle everything. Then Trent turned to me with that smirk. "Speaking of old school, shop still cranking out mailboxes?" Renata giggled. "Be nice, he's doing his best." The room went quiet, waiting for me to shrink. Instead, Sophia spoke first. Better than gambling other people's retirement money. Silence. Trent's face went from smug to stone. We left shortly after. My cousin Priya, the one relative with a functioning moral compass, called me on the drive home. "That was a lot," she said. But listen, be careful. I've been hearing things. Trent's making moves that don't look good. A year went by. The distance between me and my family widened into a canyon. Invitations stopped, which honestly felt like a mercy. At the shop, Ferrocor kept climbing. A part-time manager named Desmond came on to handle licensing, another manufacturer signed on, and the valuation hit $8 million. Sophia had left the Wildlife Trust entirely to run R&D full-time, refining formulas, keeping us honest on the environmental side. We were a real company now, quietly. Then, one October afternoon, Priya called, sounding shaken. "Are you alone?" she asked. "Trent's in trouble. Not just broke, criminal trouble. He convinced people to invest with him. Friends of your dad's, some of Renata's family, and it's gone. The land deal was fake or contaminated or something. He's completely underwater." I asked why she was telling me this. Her answer landed like a slap. "Because your dad said you're the only one with real assets. He means the land. He means the shop. He said you owe it to the family." That evening on the porch, Sophia and I watched the sun drop below the tree line. "They're going to show up here wanting me to sell everything to bail him out," I said. She went quiet, then said something that changed the whole shape of the story. "Before they get here, we need to talk. About Ferrocor. About why Trent's mess is more complicated than you think." Turns out she'd been tracking industry moves for Desmond. Who was shorting what? Who was betting against which emerging materials companies? "Trent's not doing development deals," she said. "He's been running a small hedge fund for over a year. Want to guess his biggest position?" She turned her phone toward me. Right at the top, in red, a 7-figure short against Ferrocor Materials. My own brother-in-law had bet his clients money that my company, registered under Sophia's maiden name, invisible to him, would collapse. When it didn't, his position detonated. He destroyed himself betting against me. And now he was coming to demand I destroy myself to save him. The legal threat arrived 4 days later. A courier, a fancy letterhead, a moral obligation to sell the property to settle Trent's debts, 1 week to comply or face legal action. Sophia called our lawyer, Adayez, who we'd retained months earlier once Ferrocor started needing real counsel. We laid out everything: the wedding, the years of contempt, the short position. Adayezi actually laughed out loud. "Let me get this straight. They think you're a struggling welder with some family land. You actually own an $8 million materials company. Your brother-in-law shorted it, lost everything when it worked, and now they want you to sell a corporate asset to bail him out?" She shook her head. "This is the funniest thing I've heard all year." She explained the threat was empty. The land had been transferred into Ferrocor's corporate structure 2 years earlier for liability reasons. I legally couldn't sell it even if I wanted to. Her advice: do nothing, let the deadline pass, and when they showed up in person, I want to be there for that. The deadline passed without a word. Then Monday morning, 3 cars came down my driveway. My father's sedan, Renata's SUV, and a car I didn't recognize, which turned out to belong to their attorney. They didn't knock. My father walked into the shop like he still had a claim on it. My mother's eyes were red. Renata looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Trent trailed behind, gray-faced, 20 pounds thinner. "We need to talk," my father said, dropping a folder on my workbench. "Purchase agreement. A developer's. Ready to buy. The money goes straight to escrow to cover Trent's obligations. It saves the family." "Saves him, you mean," I said. Renata broke first, all the superiority gone. "Please, Marcus. He's your family. He made a mistake. He made a lot of choices. Bad ones." Their lawyer cleared his throat about clear familial obligation and established precedent. I told him property law tends to require actually owning the property. "The land is yours through your grandfather's estate," my father snapped. "The title's clean." "Was," I said. "Past tense." That's when Sophia stepped in, calm as still water. "You've made a lot of assumptions about us. Time to correct them." She laid it out. The corporate transfer, her maiden name on the paperwork, the fact that Ferrocor Materials, valued at 8 figures, legally owned the land they'd come to. Trent's face drained white before anyone else even reacted. "Ferrocor," he said, barely audible. "You've heard of it," I said. "You should have. You bet over $1 million of client money that it would fail. Renata's mascara was already running." "What is he talking about?" "Trent, what is he talking about?" I pulled the filing Adayez had prepped. Public record, his fund's largest position, highlighted in red. "You were so sure your welder brother-in-law couldn't build anything real that you staked your client's futures on my failure. When I succeeded, you blew up." Renata's knees buckled. My mother insisted it was impossible, that I didn't have that kind of money, that I lived too simply for any of this to be true. "Exactly," I said. "I don't need a mansion to prove I built something." That's when Adayez arrived, right on cue, briefcase in hand. She introduced herself to their lawyer with the kind of pleasant, devastating precision only attorneys manage. Your demand letter is legally worthless. Attempt to force a sale, I'll countersue for harassment. Then, almost as an afterthought, I've also found evidence Mr. Trent misrepresented his short position to investors as based on inside knowledge, when it was really a hunch. That's securities fraud. Haven't sent it to the SEC yet. Wanted to give you all a chance to leave quietly first. Their attorney was already packing his bag. Get out of my shop, I said. Get out of my life. Nobody moved until I said it again. My father tried one last line about consequences. The consequences are yours, I told him, and watched them file out to their cars. The weeks after were silent, which suited me fine. Adias kept me posted. 3 lawsuits against Trent, an SEC inquiry not far behind, his marriage with Renata barely functioning in a cramped rental after they sold the house at a loss. My parents downsized to a small apartment. My father took a consulting job that was really just charity from an old partner. Meanwhile, Ferrocore kept growing. An aerospace supplier wanted to test the coating. An auto parts manufacturer came knocking next. I hired 2 employees, converted the barn into a real office, kept a handful of fabrication clients purely because I wanted to, not because I needed to. Sophia ran R&D like she was born for it. We were happy, and the quiet, no judgment, no performance made it better. Priya visited a few weeks later with a casserole and an update. Trent was genuinely broken, she said. My parents thought about me constantly but couldn't bring themselves to reach out. They think if they wait long enough, you'll come around. I won't, I told her. I know. I told them that too. She paused, at her car. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Took guts to stand your ground. I told her she was always welcome here, unlike the rest of them. That night on the porch swing, my phone buzzed with an acquisition offer. A major industrial coatings corporation wanted to buy Ferrocore outright. $22 million. I read it twice to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. 3 months later, I signed the deal in a downtown conference room. $22 million, with a 3-year consulting clause to keep developing new applications. I paid off the land completely, put it in an irrevocable trust so no one could ever touch it again, made a real donation to the wildlife trust where Sophia used to work, and invested the rest. Distant cousins I hadn't heard from in a decade suddenly remembered how much they'd always believed in me. I ignored nearly all of them. My father showed up alone one afternoon while I was working on a staircase railing. He looked 10 years older than he had a year before. I made a mistake, he said. Many mistakes. I thought I knew what success looked like. I was wrong about all of it. You were, I said. But you don't get to apologize now that there's money involved. That's not how this works. He asked what he could do. Nothing, I told him. Just don't come back. He got in his car and drove away, and for the first time in 30 years, watching him go, I felt nothing at all. Not anger, not satisfaction, just quiet. My grandfather left me this land trusting I'd do something worth doing with it. Turns out he was right to trust me. I just had to prove it on my own terms, in my own time, with nobody's approval but mine.